But I wanted to offer something here because it's coming up for me, that when you talked about constriction in the body. For me, I had so much constipation growing up, literally chronic constipation, because I was so, like I said, hypervigilant, in fear of, of confrontation. I was constricted. I was always in that like ready to hide mode, basically flight mode. And you talked about that idea of where we disassociate, where we leave our feelings or our felt sense behind. And I think that was definitely me as well. I left it behind in a lot of ways. But one thing I noticed through talking about dreams with you and the work we've done on this podcast and things, doing my own soul searching and seeking of myself, was that the thing I could really say I had, or I felt like it could be a gift or something that most people don't have, is vivid dreams. I always have had, never pushed them away, because I realized early on that they were a gift in the sense that I could experience, every ovulation, essentially, I would experience cheating on whatever boyfriend I was with at the time, and going through what that would be like and playing it all the way out, the consequence, what the fun part was, then the consequence of it, was it worth it, all the detriment that happens afterward. And I could wake up and be like, okay, I don't want to do that. It made me a very loyal partner, Yeah. And there was a lot of other things that I didn't know at the time were coming through with those messages. And now I can sort them out. But because I realized that for me, it was dreams, but for anyone listening, it might be something else for you. But that was somewhere that I still had a very thorough channel with myself. I had a thorough connection that was stable enough where I could see that it's enough that I was like, okay, yeah, I dream extremely vividly, where sometimes I'm not sure what's real life and what's a dream. And we talked on another show about that being potentially schizophrenic. But anyway, so just the offering to who's listening is that maybe start wherever you already know you do feel a connection to yourself, whatever that means. And it's something that feels, oh, well, that seems a little more powerful than maybe most have, like for me, the dreams were vivid enough where I knew that was something that could be a gift because it was so strong. I could feel it so strongly. And then it did bring me back, this last, now it's been almost a year being in COVID, of course, for everybody. But this time has been me reconnecting with myself through my dreams, is what started that inception, but led to other ways I could experience felt sense and letting off the constriction and letting go, And so I don't know if that just is an offering for really anyone listening.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that come up. One is, that's fucking incredible. Congratulations on getting to the point where you can intuitively interpret most of your dreams. I'm at that point too, where I can wake up and I'm like, fuck, I know what that means. And it's only every so often where I have a complex enough one where I have to write it out. But it's one of those things that's at the point that where if I write it out, I'm like, oh, fuck, I know what that means.
Yeah, it deepens it.
100%. And so there's a couple of things that I want to touch on. One is, one of the gifts of being traumatized is that the psychic force inside of you gets stronger because it has to deal with larger obstacles. And then one of the byproducts of that tends to be very vivid dreams. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that it's one of the greatest superpowers that you could possibly incur, is to have vivid dreams. So congratulations there. The other one is, like, for me, I think most men are more disconnected from their emotions than women on average. And the practice that first helped me connect to myself was journaling. Because I'm highly linguistic and I'm very with the symbols, it was actually journaling that gave me the first bridge to really connect to myself, that then unlocked dreams for me. And like, so for some people, like, if you're highly, like, if your art is to do things with your body, maybe your way of connecting with yourself would be like yoga.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's running, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's writing, maybe it's dream interpretation. But I completely agree. Start with where you are called. That allows you to begin to build that bridge with yourself. Because fundamentally, it comes down to, can you be completely honest with yourself? And if that's through movement or writing or confronting your dreams, like, that's where it starts. And once you're honest with yourself, it gives you the option to begin to be honest with other people. And fundamentally, what seems to be one of the most healing things that you could possibly do in this world is to cultivate truth. And that starts with yourself. And then you learn how to be vulnerable and honest and authentic with the closest people around you. And as soon as you find that one person outside of you that you can be fully in truth with, something in us like unlocks and relaxes. Like, we are social animals. We have not evolved to be alone. And the really interesting research on loneliness is that the felt sense of loneliness is not correlated at all with the amount of people in your life. It is correlated with how many people you genuinely feel seen by. And so you could be in a crowd of people every day and still feel the felt sense of loneliness. But what allows you to feel seen is if you're vulnerable. You are responsible for whether or not you have the opportunity to be seen. It doesn't mean that you will be seen by the people around you, but the first step to quote unquote curing loneliness, which, by the way, people who report feeling lonely are more likely to die early than people who are obese, people who are alcoholics, people who smoke a pack a day, or people who live in an area with heavy air pollution. Like, it's because we are not meant to be isolated individual things. We are meant to be in community. But the thing that allows for loneliness to be alchemized is to feel seen. And to do that, you have to learn how to see yourself. And I think that that's why the journaling or the dream interpretation is such a powerful invitation. And then it gives you the opportunity to actually show your true self to people around you.
Yes. Is there also something about like writing it with your hand that is effective? Or because what is it about that compared to like speaking it? What is it about writing it?
So this is an interesting thing. When writing was first introduced into ancient Greece, Socrates actually lamented that it would make people dumber. And, because it's the same idea with like Google now, that we're outsourcing a part of our cognition and we won't have to remember it, blah, blah, blah. But the thing about writing is that it engages more than one sense. So like if you're thinking, it's just happening in your head. But if you write it, you're actually integrating it into your body. I think speaking is an even higher way of integrating, because when you speak, you're not only thinking, but you're also creating a vibration in your body. And so you're also integrating sound. And when you speak to someone else, you're also integrating sight, because they're being an active reflection in the moment. And I think, first, like, if you're new to this, the place to start is, can you admit true things that are scary simply in your mind? And then the step after that would be, can you write it? Like, can you see it on paper? Like, it's now slightly more made manifest in the world. But the ultimate step of articulating your truth is to speak it. And what's interesting is you can begin speaking your truth alone, and your body will give you feedback. Like, one of the most powerful things about MDMA is that it's almost impossible, if you're alone, to say something out loud that's not true and feel okay. Like, at least for me, the felt sense of tuning in my body, I can be alone on MDMA and do this type of work and say something out loud and instantly know whether or not it's true. And then to be received by somebody else from speaking your truth is like the fourth level. Yeah. They've done studies, and you could critique the scientific method for maybe not understanding this, but they have found that there is not a difference between typing and writing with your hand when it comes to healing trauma. So that's just an interesting side note to plant. But did that answer your question, Jade?
Yeah, no, that did. I just didn't know if there was something about it specifically but that makes
I wanted to
sense.
also just, because, and we're kind of going back and forth, I guess, here on all these topics, but they all play together. When we talked about figuring out a way to tap in with yourself, and journaling is such a big piece of that, whether it's dream journaling or just, what is it called? Train of thought journaling. I don't know the what I'm talking about. Stream of consciousness. Thank you. I know you guys know this. But then when you talk about having community and having a person, that one person, even if it just starts with that you can finally relay this information to and get it outside of you, so that you have a kind of a sounding board or reflecting board of someone who's not going to hold, judgment over you. I mean, I guess we're all judging to some degree, but who's not going to shame you in any regard. Don't be afraid to pay for it, like a therapist, or come to Jade or my OnlyFans and DM with us. I mean, we do that literally all the time for people, not just men. Women are over there. We're talking to people, holding space for their darkest secrets and their deepest truths, because that's what we want to do, that's what it's for. So don't be afraid. I'm saying don't be afraid to pay for it, because for me, that has been one of the most powerful ways that I find I show up. I paid a therapist for every single week to be accountable to, you know, so that I would show up for the work. And she was a beautiful mirror for me, you know? So find whoever that person is. It doesn't have to be someone who just pops into your life, because then you get back into that cycle of loneliness and you're literally repelling people because you think no one's ever going to pop into your life who can hold that space for you. You can bring them in by paying for it. I mean, that's a beautiful relationship.
Yeah. I completely agree. And to reinforce that, there's a couple of reasons why that is sometimes the best option. One is you might simply not have someone who has enough emotional intelligence in your life to hold the space for the shit that is true for you. And it would be the best option to get someone who is a professional. But also, and I'm sure that a lot of the people who listen to this podcast and you guys are going to resonate with this too, but there's lots of people who identify as helpers or healers who aren't ready and who want your truth. They want to hold space for you, but then you can see how their behavior will unfold later, where it's like, oh, you weren't able to hold that. And also, even if you're around competent people, maybe the truth is about them, and that you need to get someone outside of your tribe to fully release what the truth is without dealing with the implications, the repercussions, and then you develop that safety, and then you're able to bring these hard truths to people who are close to you. So I completely agree. One of the greatest options is to find someone that you resonate with and then to pay for it.
Yeah. When we talk about that, can we also, because I think this could be common. I don't know if it's only common when people are doing MDMA assisted therapy, but can we talk about like transference and how for some people, while healing, it can be very confusing for someone to feel safe with someone of the opposite sex while they help them work through sexual trauma or any type of trauma from someone else of the opposite sex that wasn't making them feel safe, and what they can do with what comes up around that. You mentioned when I brought this up to you that it is pretty common, but I don't know that many people have heard of it. I hadn't.
Right. Yeah. So this is a great question. Okay. So fundamentally, your core relationship to your soul, or to that inner voice inside of you that everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say it, its first molding will happen with your caretaker of the opposite gender most of the time. And if that relationship is not held by a conscious, beautiful king or queen, which most of us weren't fortunate enough to have that, your connection to your soul will be warped by your relationship to the primary caretaker of the opposite gender. And then every relationship that you get in, like romantic relationship, when you fall in love, it allows for that warping to either correct or to twist further. And when you go get a therapist, if they are of the opposite gender, if you have the trust with them where they're able to really get and begin to heal that bridge between the ego and the soul, it can often feel like you are falling in love with them. And this was so common that Freud created a term for it, and it's called transference. And it's almost required for the healing to happen, because it's what allows that bridge to begin to be remolded. But if you're not aware of it, it will feel like you are falling in love with them. And then there's a thing called countertransference, where if the therapist is not trained enough, they will feel like they're falling in love too, because they're receiving the love beam from the other person. And it's really tricky, because it's almost required for the bridge to begin to heal itself. But the ultimate goal of the therapist is to reconnect. It's almost like you can imagine they're there to hold the projection of the loved one, to allow the bridge to self-correct. And then if they're really talented, it's to pass the bridge back off to the individual so they can connect it to their soul. And like the fundamental healing that happens is when the individual reconnects cleanly to that whisper inside of them. And then that's the ultimate psychotherapist that you will ever find, is that still inner whisper that will guide you through your intuition and your integrity in every situation.
This may sound silly, but does that mean that there is more healing takes place when you are speaking to someone of the opposite sex in
That's
therapy?
what I was
going
to
So
ask.
so any answer that I give is not backed by research here. It would just be me kind of going off of my intuition. But it depends where the most damage is. So the parent of the same gender will be your connection to how you show up in the world, which is what we would call the ego or the persona. And if both of those are broken, the one that needs to be, or that is most important for healing, would be the one with the opposite gender, because in a Jungian standpoint, that's how you relate to your inner guide, which he called the soul, but it's not the same way that most people currently use soul. If that one's not really warped, you can do a lot of healing if the damage came from, the caretaker of the same gender, because that will often represent how you show up in the world externally. And so both are important. The harder one to heal is the one with the opposite gender. But if that one's broken, that is the one that, if that's not fixed, it's like trying to build a house on a broken foundation.
Yeah. And I imagine not just on a healing level, but like within, but when you're with the same sex and it reprograms that story that you have, that you choose different types of girlfriends or different types of boyfriends of friendship. And then when it's of the opposite sex, that just that alone, that reprogramming of that story between that gender, not just with the inner healing, causes you to change how you choose your partners as well.
100%.
But I'm curious too, when people I know for me, the last couple of months through ketamine and MDMA therapy, I was having different visions of different sexual trauma. And like you said, it doesn't matter what was real or what was not. But the moment I started to have those, my body felt closed off to sex. And so for maybe 3-4 months, I haven't been sexually active because of everything that I've been processing. And so I'm curious how, when sexual trauma starts to come up and how when we start to work through it, how that affects our sex drive. And is that different for everybody, or does everybody's body kind of close off in that way?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I've understood so far is that it depends on how you've coped in the past, that you will activate whatever is the felt sense of safety. And for some people, that's hyper.
Yeah. And I was a very prude teenager, so that makes sense.
Right. And so because that was your default coping pattern to feel safe, that will likely be the way that it will manifest in you as you go through the healing, because your psyche is like, we have to protect. And yeah, so it depends on how you coped with it in the past will likely determine what comes up as you start to do this work.
Okay. Did you touch on all the ways to heal trauma that you wanted to touch on?
I touched on what is healing for PTSD. I'll move to like cognitive trauma or storytelling trauma, because it seems to be, of the three, that's the one that, easiest is not the right word, but it's the one that requires the least amount of technical interference or assistance. And what I have found for cognitive trauma is James Pennebaker's expressive writing technique, which is essentially, and I have a blog post on my website that people can check out if you just Google Erick Godsey expressive writing. But essentially what you do is you follow the protocol that he wrote out, and it's on the blog post. And for 4 days in a row, you set a timer for 20 minutes and you write stream of consciousness about the traumatic experience. And what intuitively happens is, as you rewrite that with the prompts that he gives for 4 days, by the end of the 4th day, the innate and healing intelligence inside of you will intuitively understand the story from different perspectives to a degree where you have a felt sense of understanding of, why did this happen? What was actually good about it? And how is my life better for it? Because when it comes to cognitive trauma, a part of what your psyche is doing is it's asking, or it's basically saying, something hurtful happened to us in the past, and the way that we responded to it wasn't adaptive. If it happened again, we have to come up with a new strategy. And you almost intuitively work through it by simply bringing your awareness to it every day for 4 days. And what is common is the act of doing it. You might feel sadder than you have for a long time while you're doing it, because you're essentially reopening the wound so you can fully clean it. But the act of reopening the wound can be painful. But what the research has shown, and it's fucking incredible, is for the next year, you will go to the doctor half as often. If you have any pain conditions, your felt sense of pain will be reduced. If you have chronic biological illnesses, their symptoms will reduce. If you have PTSD or depression, their symptoms will reduce. They've even found that you'll score higher on any type of cognitive test. you're more likely to get hired. I don't know how the fuck that plays out, but they've done that study. And it's because you're allowing your brain to put down something from the past that it thinks it has to think about all the time. And so that is the most effective technique I have found so far for healing cognitive trauma. Developmental trauma, if I'm just being honest, I haven't done enough research on that yet to feel comfortable giving like advice for what to do. But my understanding of it is to find a therapist who is trained in complex PTSD or developmental trauma, and then they'll work with you through the modalities that they've been trained in. Because the thing about developmental PTSD is it destroys our attachment bonds, and our attachment styles are how we bond with people. It's how we trust people. And most people who have a lot of developmental PTSD fundamentally don't even trust humans. And so the complex PTSD therapist has to really understand like the work that is before them. And so that is what I would offer there, is to find a trained therapist who specializes in complex PTSD.
The book Complex PTSD is also really helpful.
Yes, I haven't read it yet, but it's on my stack.
I've just started it, but it's already helpful. So,
and just listen back to Erick's podcast or read his blog on what is trauma. Is it called What is Trauma?
So good. Yeah.
It gives you all the book references in there as well. Okay, so I'm going to pivot us to keeping up with Erick Godsey. So the first time we had you on, you were at a place in your life where you're in open relationships. That was what was more appealing to you at the time. The second time we had you on, you told us that, you know, the growth you desired in open relationships, you discovered you could have in closed relationship. You were experimenting there. You've gone through some ups and downs. We're trying to just keep up with you, man. Where do you stand right now on all of it? What's your perspective at this point on relationships, closed, open, etc.?
Wow. A lot has happened this year. Hopefully we have 2 more hours. Okay.
We have 2 sub questions after this.
Perfect. So the big thing that happened about 2.5 years ago is I went to Peru and I did Wachuma and Vilca. And Wachuma is a type of San Pedro, and then Vilca is the most potent type of DMT that lasts for an hour. And it blew me open. And my big prayer when I was coming home was, I'm ready to do the work to remove the walls around my heart. And when I first came back, with my mind, I was like, I'll do open relationship because that's the best way to break down the walls around my heart. And what I found for about 6 months is that I was saying yes to what I thought was scary, but I wasn't allowing myself to actually be vulnerable with any of these women because I was starting at open and it wasn't challenging me at all. And I did an MDMA ceremony alone, and I really realized, oh, you're fucking playing yourself. You aren't doing any of the work. And then organically, in the next 3 days, all of the relationships that I was in organically ended themselves by the other partner's like choice. And I was like, all right, universe, heard. So I was single for a while, and then I got into a relationship. And this is the first like monogamous relationship I had gotten into since I had like really made the vow to, you know, open my heart. And we were together for a couple of months, and then she ended up cheating on me. And it was the first time that I'd ever been cheated on. And my big fear since I was a child was, what if they cheat on me? And so I had to confront that wall. And it was incredibly painful. It was the first time I had ever felt depressed in my life because this was the first relationship where I had started the story, oh, maybe this is the one, and we have babies and all that stuff. And the way that I alchemized that is basically whenever anyone asked me how I was doing, I told them the truth. And I just retold the story of what happened to the point where I didn't cry anymore. Like it took like 9 retellings of the story to people close to me where I was like, oh, okay. Like I almost intuitively did the expressive writing exercise verbally by telling the truth to my close friends. And then I ended up, this is going to be so funny once I get through the whole arc of what's been unfolding. But while we were together, we made the choice to go do ayahuasca together, like while we were dating. And then the fallout happened and we still chose like, let's go do ayahuasca together. And it was beautiful. Everyone who knew me was like, don't do that. That's not a good idea. You shouldn't bring that energy into the space. But what was interesting is nothing about her and our relationship came up in the ayahuasca space. But by the time that I finished the 4 nights of ayahuasca, I had this epiphany where I realized the larger purpose of me being called to this relationship was that it was my love for her that brought me to actually do ayahuasca. Because how I am when I'm single is it's all about the work. I'm sitting at my desk every day. I'm not fucking traveling. Like, no, it took her wanting to go to bring me out of my like work monk mode and brought me to ayahuasca, which was the single most transformative experience of my life. And it felt like I fully energetically closed and understood why this relationship played out the way that it played out. I was single again for a while. And then probably 6 weeks after that, I entered into a relationship with someone that I had been best friends with for a couple of years. And I'd never done that before. And it has sparked a whole fucking thing that has unfolded for the last 11 months. And I want to protect her privacy, but also be in truth with you guys. The core of it was she had a lot of trauma that she had ran from through coping behaviors for a very long time. And by entering into a relationship with me, she was forced to confront these traumas. And the first couple of months of the year, her response was basically like, I know I'm in love with you, but I'm going to run away. And so there was this, I've never been anxiously attached. So of the 3 attachment styles, there's securely attached, there's anxious, and there's avoidant. Before I started doing the work, my attachment style was avoidant because I didn't want to hurt myself. So I was like, I don't care. And then, but whenever I enter into a relationship, my intuitive way of relating is to securely relate. This was the first time I ever felt what it felt like to feel anxious, because I could feel that she was in love with me, but I could see that her coping behaviors from her traumas were so powerful that she kept running. I eventually put that relationship down because I was like, this isn't going anywhere. And then I entered into a really beautiful relationship that was completely clean, but because of, in hindsight, I was still attached to that best friend. And the truth sharing with my partner at the time in the middle of the year eventually led to her being like, I'm out. Like, I love you, but you're not, and this isn't, so we're done. And then a bunch of really powerful personal things happened where I eventually entered into, a monogamous relationship with this woman for a couple of months. But I could just feel that like her coping avoidant behaviors were so strong that I could feel that she had never really fully shown up to the relationship. And then after like 2.5 months, she had the consciousness to be like, I can't hold this container anymore, so I'm going to step out. The way that she stepped out was in such a way where directly afterwards she was having sex with someone else, and it felt like I got abandoned and got cheated on, but I didn't. And for like a week I had to hold this feeling of like my entire nervous system is responding as if the love of my life is having sex with someone else all the time. And it was completely destabilizing. Because we're best friends, we're still in each other's lives. And about 2 months after that, she finally got to the point where she felt safe enough to reveal that at the very beginning of the relationship, when we were monogamous, she had gotten drunk and cheated with her ex, and that she had been intertwined with her ex the entire year, but hadn't been upfront with me about it. And it just completely like broke the trust. Like I couldn't trust her at all. While we were dating, we made the plans to go do ayahuasca together. So we're still going to go motherfucking do ayahuasca together in a couple of weeks. And it is absolutely not lost on me that I'm clearly in a cycle that I have not healed. And just like 5 days ago, I had a really clear dream that was super fucking confronting. And the dream was I was in a store, it felt like Target, and I was in this aisle, and there was this dude in like all black that felt super douchey. And he was bragging about how he only dates women who are traumatized because it makes him feel safe because he can see their entire trauma cycle. And I was like, this dude is a fucking dick. I was so repulsed by him. And then I go into the next aisle, and do you guys know who Christine Hassler and Steph Stefanos are? They're relationship coaches that I know, and they're married, and they're super, like, I respect them so much. They told me, you wait until you feel safe, and then you escalate relationships quickly because you're afraid of rejection. And then I woke up and I was like, fuck, I know what this means. And I don't want this to be true. But clearly the first part of the dream was my shadow. And my psyche was showing me that my shadow is I'm attracted to women who are traumatized because it lets me feel safe. And then one of the symbols for the higher self are divine couples. And the fact that it was a couple and they're both relationship coaches. And they told me directly to my face, essentially why I feel safe with traumatized women is because it allows me to feel like I'm in control. And so my heart is being eviscerated because of this unconscious drive to choose women that make me feel safe. But then the tragicness of it is that the thing that feels safe leads to coping patterns that lead to me being cheated on. And my intuition is that as I go into ayahuasca, this is going to be something that's going to come up, and that it's not about the women. It's about my shit. And I'm going to go show up to that fully. And this is the first point in my life since doing Wachuma where I have no romantic relationship in my life. And there's this part of me that is just fucking exhausted with relationship right now. But I recognize that trying to date one of my best friends has eviscerated all the walls around my heart in the way that I thought open relationship would. And I can see the beauty in the like cliche, be careful what you wish for. Like I fucking wished for something powerful 2.5 years ago when my heart was wide open coming out of this medicine, and the universe was like, I got you. And like, it's been the most brutal, emotional, like heart year of my life. And I can feel that I'm like crawling to ayahuasca being like, fuck. So that's what's been unfolding for me. To answer the question about where do I stand on like open relationship and monogamy, is where I currently stand is that my intuition is that open relationship is a very powerful training ground, but that I truly believe every soul wants a sacred union. And a sacred union can have aspects of open to it, but I think everyone wants to be chosen. And so whoever is like the third in an open relationship, my intuition is that they're at the point in their life where they're learning that's not a stable configuration for them if they claim their full power of what it is that their soul wants. And I think everybody wants a sacred union. And a sacred union can have any type of rules that the two agree, but they each know you're my king, you're my queen. And there's no like trying to have two queens or trying to have two kings. I haven't seen it done by anyone that I know in person where it's stable. So open feels like a really powerful training ground, but that ultimately I think everyone, when they claim fully what they desire, and if they feel that they're worthy of claiming what they desire, it's to be in a sacred union. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I guess the one caveat that I would offer is a lot of people think they're saying yes to a sacred union when they go into a monogamous relationship. But really what it is they're running and they're trying to find some place to hide. And then they go get fat and they stop pursuing their dreams and they almost chain their partner to their, I just want to be comfortable. So I don't think that monogamy is essentially a sacred union. I think a sacred union is this higher thing that's like a spiritual commitment. I will take responsibility for being whole, and I want to be whole with you. So we can make a third thing that's doper than what each of us can be individually, and that we serve the third thing. And that's kind of where I'm at.
I like it. It's fascinating that our evolution has not come to the point where we have to get there before we create the third thing. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of kids would have a lot less trauma. We'd also have a lot less children generally. Or maybe it would be the motivating factor for us to do our work, right? I mean, I don't know. I wanted to ask you specifically about the book We by Robert Johnson that I know you're a huge fan of, and the gold that it is brought into your life. So I haven't read it yet. It's on the top of my to-read list. So maybe you can just give us some reasons why we need to dig in there.
Yeah, so the book We really touches on the thing that I was talking about earlier with Transference. And We is probably the most important relationship book that I've ever read. And every time that I explain it to people, I see people's eyes light up because they're like, oh my God, that's me. I fucking totally get it. And the main idea is, so that book is written by a Jungian. And the argument that he makes is that one of our fundamental needs is to feel a connection to the divine. And religion 100 years ago or 200 or 300 years ago served as the symbol that could hold the projection of that need to connect to the divine, that we have to have something to project that onto to know it, and that the highest order is to finally reclaim it and know that that divinity is within us. When science came along and kind of destroyed the conventional container of religion, that didn't get rid of the need to have to project the divine onto something to understand it. It just had to find something new to project it onto. And the argument in we is that Western culture used romantic love as the new thing to project the inner divinity onto. Romantic love is unique to the West. It's not like in other cultures, there isn't this idea of like, if you fall in love with someone, you abandon your family if it's your true love, and you give up all your responsibilities, and you just go merge with this thing and just be drunk in love. And then if it's gone, you go to someone else, because that's where the passionate love is. What Robert Johnson talks about in We is that if you don't understand that this is happening in your psyche, it's going to create a lot of destruction and pain. And it looks like this. You meet someone, you don't know anything about them, but you're like, oh my God, I am in love with them. You are projecting your inner ideal other that serves as a construct for the divine onto this person. Because one of the things to connect to is you've lived with you your entire life and you barely know who the fuck you are. So when you meet someone and you haven't even really spoken to them, but you feel this like, oh my God, you're projecting your God onto them. And one of the ways to understand this is it's almost like a person's body is like the frame of a 4K TV. And you can only project onto a certain type of frame because they fit like your idea of the inner other. But the vision that you see when you look at them is entirely your projection. You are illuminating all 4,000 pixels. He talks about it takes about 12 to 16 months to interact with that human enough where like 1/4 of the pixels are actually what they are as opposed to your projection. And what people will tend to do of their own conscious is as soon as they start to see the glimmer of the actual person behind their projection, they're like, I fell out of love, or you're not who I thought you were.
It's the wizard in Wizard of Oz.
Right.
He's not the magic curtain man.
And the thing that Robert Johnson talks about is that if you're unconscious of this process, you think you've fallen out of love. And so you unconsciously begin to look for a new TV frame to project your fantasy of the thing that you want to merge with, which is really your inner other. What he talks about is if you become conscious of this, you will actually recognize that after the 12 to 16 months, that is actually your first opportunity to actually love the person and to reclaim the projection and to put it where it's supposed to be, which is inside of you. But most people will run from relationship to relationship because they want to fuck themselves, because they want to fuck the inner projection of their ideal other. And that what he talks about is the way through this is to cultivate a felt connection to your soul and to recognize that your inner ideal other is your soul. And you can do that through ritual, meditation, plant medicines. He doesn't talk about plant medicines, but I'm going to put that in there. But anything that helps you connect to the divinity inside of you. And then to recognize at times my partner can consciously hold the projection and we can do freaky shit, you know, like that's fun, but that they are their own being and that it's actually a disservice to them if you unconsciously are seeking them to be your God, because they can't hold that. And it denies them the opportunity of really being seen by you, and vice versa.
I love we. I just got she. Next I'll get he. But I'm curious, like, does that, when you're, because typically I feel like in the beginning is like the falling in love feelings and it's really fun and it's heated. Does that make that do you feel like now for you having that knowledge, you feel like I'm not really in love and like, you're like, my mind's just tricking me. And then do you have to wait like 12 to 16 months to really know if you're in love with somebody? And if you don't even like them anymore, then
all your alarms in your phone are going off.
You take that opportunity.
Right. No. So
you take that opportunity 12 to 16 months. You take that opportunity when you don't even seem to like that person to see if you can love that person, or do you realize, oh, well, this whole time I've been projecting and there's nothing actually there?
So this is a great question, because I think that most people who hear this, that's one of the first things that they think. And the first thing that comes up is if you're conscious of it, you can appreciate the beauty of what is happening. And like, this is an instinct. You can't stop this, but you can consciously, deeply enjoy it. That this human has come into my life. And if you believe in soul contracts, this human has chosen to be one of the frames of the projection of my God. And we both have a deep opportunity to explore divinity through each other and like enjoy that. But also recognize, like, maybe don't make life decisions in the first 6 months. Like maybe deeply enjoy the motherfucking dance, drink it fully. Like one of the ideas is that the gods envied humans because humans got to be in bodies. We get to taste coffee. We get to kiss. We get to know what orgasms are. We get to eat great food. We get to appreciate the wind coming through a tree and making that rustling sound. Like, we get to be in bodies, enjoy what the fuck is going on, but also understand, like, I don't know who they are. And get to know them. And then when you get to that point where you start to feel like, oh, they brush their teeth in a way that's kind of annoying, or like, I don't like the way that they make coffee. Like, you can recognize, okay, I am now at the opportunity that if I want to, I can get to really see them. And then you get to choose in that moment. But it for sure, like, don't overthink it. Don't have a motherfucking alarm clock in your calendar. Like, oh, it's December 20th. It's been 12 months. Like, you can appreciate that this is a beautiful part of the love dance that we have in our culture. And then also, you know, just have a quiet sobriety alongside the passionate drunkenness to recognize, like, I don't need to make any rash decisions about how I'm going to move forward in my life until I really get to know them. You know, it's the same idea that if you have a vision on MDMA, wait a week before you act on whatever your big insights are to, like, come back to a baseline. It's the same thing with ayahuasca or mushrooms or anything like that.
Or even a dream.
100%. Like, allow yourself to settle. And then, like, there's really great writers and poets that, like, don't know they're talking about this stuff, but do talk about this stuff in a really clear and honest way, where, like, there's that great line in Good Will Hunting where the Robin Williams character is talking to the main character, and he's like, I love the way that she farts. Like, all the little idiosyncratic things that are uniquely hers are the things that I love most. And to me, like, that's capital L love. But you can only get to that point after 6, 12, 18 months of just being drunk on God to recognize, like, oh, they take shits, too many enchiladas, and they burp, you know? And, like, that's the opportunity to really start to appreciate, like, the meat suit that has willingly taken on your projection of God.
Yeah. Firstly, I just want to just express gratitude for knowing someone like you who's vulnerable enough and open enough to traverse all this with us and share your experience that openly. And I know last time we talked about this specific topic, you know, you were going through a place that was about being blisteringly honest with your partner and how important that is. And I love this balance that it seems you've come to of yes. And, you know, instead of scrambling for the truth, because I think that's what I feel like a pressure when you talk about, okay, well, you're going to have some time where you're not going to know this person's truth. You're not going to know the truth is what that sounds like to my psyche. And I'm like, wait, but I need to know, you know, the truth. What am I wasting time for? And then we have this biological clock that's ticking, especially if you're females, all this stuff that starts populating.
Especially if you have kids.
Yeah. And that's my narrative trauma, I guess.
So the thing that I want to offer there quick is, you can't project this inner ideal other on everybody. You can't even project it on most people. There's a certain type of person that will catch it. And you can, like, I have faith that if it gets caught on someone, it's meant to be caught here, you know? And so it's not just this, like, blind thing. Like, there's an inner intelligence in you that's like, that TV is a TV to go.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the beauty of it, is that you've found a way to balance, you know, balance the idea of, yes, we're here to look for the truth at the end of the day. That's what we're seeking. But it's also important to witness the truth that is being right now, you know, in this moment. And it's the experience of this section of love that also looks like fucking yourself or being with God to that degree, or however you want to call it, which is beautiful. And it's an amazing part of life. And it's also the truth of why we're here, a big part of it. And then to witness it unfold into the next layer, right, of what the real person you're being with also is. So I just love the way that you're articulating it. You know, we're getting to witness on this podcast, like, the progression. And I think it's so cool to see it unfold in each layer. We've been along with you on this ride, like, in more ways than one, you know.
If I am going to do ayahuasca with someone who cheated on me next year, you guys need to fucking have an intervention with me.
Oh my God.
We'll bring this podcast and the last one up and be like, look, dude, this is a cycle. We need to talk about it. Again, on our annual talk. Yeah. So
We have our short questions that we ask everybody.
We're going to wrap up the show here. I was going to say we have so much more to discuss, and we know where to find you, but I would love to talk to you about,
he's going to change his number.
Yeah. But I know you dived so deeply into things that I know our listeners deal with a lot, like depression and antidepressants, which is a huge, topic in itself. So I'll leave that for another time. But I want to also
do a whole 2 hours on that.
For sure. I want to invite people to go find you and your work as well on that specifically. And I know you're going to even unfold more of that in the years to come. So we'll be watching, we'll be sharing, I'm sure, with our listeners all about it. So for now, let's close out today's episode with the questions we ask you every year. So first off, if you could hug your younger self right now, Erick, what would you say?
It's going to hurt, but you're going to do it. And I'm proud of you.
How old were you this time?
5.
I love that. I would tell my 5-year-old self that. If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be this year?
Probably Peter Levine's book on trauma. I think it's called Waking the Tiger.
Yeah, Waking the Tiger. That's really good.
If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would you say?
You chose to come here to fulfill a sacred task. You don't have to find it. You only have to remember it. And you have a still inner whisper that if you had the courage to hear it, is waiting for you. And it will guide you to your sacred task. And if you said yes to it, it would heal everything that you feel needs to be healed and would give you the most beautiful, fulfilling life that you could imagine.
That's beautiful. And if you say no to it, what's going to happen is that Dolores Cannon video I sent you earlier.
Well, then the trauma begins again. I suppose the re-experiencing.
All right. Before we let you go, where can people find you online?
My website, erickgodsey.com. I have a weekly newsletter you can sign up for, and I have a journaling course that you can dive into. My podcast is The Myths That Make Us, and then my Instagram is Erick Godsey, but I won't be on that for a couple of weeks as I prepare to go be judged by ayahuasca.
All right.
Beautiful stuff, Erick. We always, as you know, appreciate your work. And just you generally as a human for showing up for us in so many ways too, and supporting us, whether it be on your show or in person. And this has been a unexpected but beautiful relationship. So thank you.
Thank you too so much for seeing me and for being a part of this journey and for asking the good questions.
Yeah, thank you. All right. That was good.
Your posture right now, literally, you're like,
I know. Like I just had a nice drink.
Give me a cigarette.
In the pool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That was my posture.
Yeah.
Right after I threw the remotes.
Yeah. So these TVs aren't working. It's always enlightening, always groundbreaking. And
I feel like we can ask him literally any question and he's just like, yes, I know the answer. And it's just like,
I've been trying to discern what Godsey's like specific energy is. And it's very, and people are going to be like, Christians might be.
No, I already know what you're going to say. It's like a Christ-like energy, right?
Yeah. He has the Jesus energy, but also something else. There's something, it's not earthly, and it's almost...
Parangi has it too. Parangi has a similar, that not earthly energy that you're talking about, I see in Parangi.
Yeah, it's alien of some sort, but in a friendly sense. I mean, it's here to help us.
Right. Yeah.
We come in peace for your remembering. Yeah. It's good stuff. I mean, it's definitely, it's work, and you know why I like it? Well, first of all, like he talks about us wanting to basically fuck the God, our own selves, basically fuck our own selves in the first 10 months or 12 months or whatever it is of a relationship. Totally get what he's saying there. And also when we talk to people and have communion with people, community, we want to see ourselves in others, reflected in others. That's literally what we're doing. I know it sounds so selfish and
I know that's similar to your magic trick. He already did my magic trick and he did it so much better. So no magic trick for me today, but I know yours is similar. So
well, I love that your magic trick is that Peter Levine practice, shower practice. And so just because we're at the end of the episode, I want to remind people to do that again, because I'm going to do it.
I did it before we got on.
Definitely tap in and see where they're stuck where I can't get energy to flow. So there felt sense in there. That's the part I didn't realize of how that works. Like I can understand like slapping a part of your body and being like, oh, I felt that. Well, what about the parts that you don't feel? Right. Staying with that is the work I'm going to try on myself for sure. Okay. So my magic trick today is the traits. It's basically to recognize, to become aware, right? That the traits that we don't want to acknowledge in ourselves, we project onto others. And obviously we talked a lot about this today on the episode, but this is something that the holistic psychologist on Instagram, who we've had on the show, she is incredible. Maybe one of the most like deeply set in her calling I think I've ever witnessed, because every time I see something from her, every time I hear or see a post from her, or I listen to something from her or listen back to our show, I'm just like, damn, like this person articulates deep work, like deep concepts. No, the holistic psychologist.
Oh, holistic psychologist.
Yeah. This is who this magic trick comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I hear her articulate something, I've never witnessed someone who understands it more deeply.
What I like too is she says it so simply.
Exactly.
She doesn't make it all glitz and glamour and like, she makes it easy to understand.
Yeah. And I think that's like a marker of someone who knows it so deeply, who like understands the work so deeply there, but to articulate it with just simplicity. Anywhooser. So the title here is that the traits we don't want to acknowledge in ourselves, we project onto others. That doesn't taste good to the ego at all. That's a little bitter on your tongue when you taste that little sentence. But just to deepen that thought, she says, some of the deepest healing I've experienced comes from doing shadow work. It's not for the faint of heart, she warns us. Our shadow refers to the part of ourselves that we have denied. As children, our greatest need is to be loved and cared for. We are completely dependent on our parent figures. We're little sponges soaking up everything they say. We learn from them what parts of us they feel are desirable. You're so helpful, mommy. You're so helpful to mommy. Or what parts of us that they feel are undesirable. Like they might say something like, stop being so sensitive. We kind of talked about that with Godsey earlier. We learn where we're accepted for being a helper and where we're not accepted for when we are having big emotions like crying. We might also hear messages about how to be good boys or good girls, how good girls or good boys should be. This is where we begin to deny the parts of ourselves that we then create our shadow with. And if we're not conscious, we project these parts of ourselves onto others, the good and the bad. So the truth is that all humans have a wide variety of traits within us. The truth is that all humans have a wide variety of traits within us, including things that are seen as negative, quote unquote. Each of us have parts of us that carry greed, jealousy, shame, selfishness, lust, immaturity, the list goes on. Each of us also have great capacity to give, to love, to be selfless, to serve. Each of us have unique talents waiting to be expressed. And to begin shadow work, you just have to notice what you see in others and how you speak about them. The things you see in most, the things you see in people the most, the things that you notice in people the most are the parts of you waiting to be witnessed, waiting to be integrated. She says, when you see something positive in someone that you wish, quote unquote, you had, you already do have it. That's why you can see it. So say to yourself, that's in me too. And when you see something in another person that's negative, quote unquote, negative, and you attempt to judge it, see this part of yourself too, that's waiting for you to love it, to be with it. Say to yourself, that's in me too. She says, the ego will put up a fight. The soul will take a deep breath as you release self-judgment. So yeah, just a reminder that if you see something in someone else, whether good or bad, you've projected it onto them because it is within you. This is one of the hardest things. Like I notice when I talk to my family members about this, my close family members, like my parents, when they're going on and on about, one of my siblings or something that's negative, I'm like, hey, where is that living in you right now? Like, why are you so angry about this? This is, this is something really stirring up something for you. Look inward. And they hate when I say that, probably because I'm their daughter. So it's really hard for me to hear that from me. But I think it's just such a valuable tool. And that's it's a hard practice, but I think it's one of the most valuable practices we can do.
Yeah. I want to get better at just asking myself that. I feel like I am good at asking others that, but I want to get better at that being my immediate response to myself. All right, Magic Mothers, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much to us, and don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Magic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and want to know what is lighting you up.
Yes, guys, and we release a new episode every Monday, so you can catch us again next week or go listen to our past episodes in our podcast library now. And I want to just remind you that the way that this show grows and thrives is by rating, reviewing, subscribing. It truly, truly is the way that we get, what do I want to call it? The way that we get paid for the show is in reviews, literally. So if, we're not asking for monetary support of any kind, all we're asking for is a review for, us putting together this work for you. And I hope it is adding value to your lives. If it is, please rate, review, subscribe. We will benefit so much more than you know from it. So appreciate you for that. Until then,
be alive.